They didn't steal a watch. They tried to steal my father. I was halfway through measuring a sun-baked roof, pencil behind my ear and fiberglass dust in my shirt collar, when an unknown number lit up my phone. I almost let it die in my pocket. I hate surprises, but something in my gut said answer now, so I thumbed it on. Yeah. Is this Noah Reddick? A voice asked, low, rasped raw by cigarettes or time. Who's asking? Name's Miguel. I run Silver Star Pawn on East Magnolia. I think I've got something that belongs to you. That right? I said, already annoyed and already curious. What is it? A stainless submariner. Black dial. Engraving on the back reads, to Noah, love always, Dad. Everything in me went still. Then I was moving, spinning toward the desk I keep in the corner of the warehouse office, yanking open the bottom drawer where the blue leather box should have been tucked behind invoices and a microfiber cloth. Empty space stared back. My throat burned. Heat crawled up my neck. I swallowed it down and forced my voice to behave. Where'd you get it? Kid came in late yesterday. Said it was his. Look, this is one of those conversations you make in person. You want to see something? He gave the address even though I didn't ask. The tone said it wasn't a suggestion. The guys on my crew shouted after me when I blew through the bay doors, something about a bid due at 3. I didn't hear it. The only thing I heard was my dad's voice, the last morning he wore that watch. He was down to bones by then. Chemo had carved him into a sketch of himself, but his eyes were still mean and bright. He slipped the Rolex from his wrist with the stubborn care he reserved for small, important tasks. His hand shook. He pressed the cool weight into my palm. This is yours, kid, he'd said. Don't let anyone take it from you. I should have kept it in a safe. Should have kept it at home, not in the office drawer I'd convinced myself was fine. I should have known Jace would try something the second life told him no. My mom's golden boy. Her second husband's son. The white-toothed avatar of what happens when a person never meets a consequence they can't tap dance around. I hit every yellow light between our yard and East Magnolia and rolled stop signs like I had a letter from God. Silver Star Pawn is wedged between a payday loan place and a half-dead vape shop, metal bars across the windows and a hand-painted sign that had lost a war with the sun. I parked crooked, left the door of my truck hanging open, and went in. It smelled like dust and metal. A glass case ran the length of the shop, filled with scratched watches, tangles of chains, and electronics you'd have to apologize to if you turned them on. A big man with a thick neck and forearms like he still unloaded freight for fun propped both hands on the counter. His face had that carved look men get when they've seen more than one bad night. You Noah? He asked. That's me. He nodded once. You've got your old man's jaw. I didn't reply. He reached beneath the counter and set a blue leather box on the glass. The edges were worn shiny, the latch nicked in the spot my dad had always hit too hard. Miguel lifted the lid with a kind of reverence that told me he understood what this was, even if he didn't know our particular history. There it was. Black dial. Steel bracelet. The bezel had a tiny scar at 2 o'clock from the day my father smacked it against the underside of a Formica countertop on a remodel he swore would be the death of him. He'd laughed then, before cancer made laughter expensive. I picked it up and turned it over. The inscription hadn't moved. To Noah, love always, Dad. Who brought it in? I asked, though the answer was already painting itself on the inside of my skull. Tall, blonde, early 20s, Miguel said. Said his name was Jace. Claimed it was his father's. Claimed a lot of things. Didn't know how to say submariner right, for starters. Didn't look like a man who'd earned something like this, either. He paused. I didn't buy it. My fists had a life of their own. I unclenched them, because the last thing I needed was to bleed on my father's watch. Miguel slid an old paper folder across the counter. Your dad ever pawn this? Don't get jumpy. He redeemed. It's why I called instead of cops. No, he never mentioned it. Well, he did. Miguel opened the folder. Inside was a photocopied pawn ticket, the paper gone soft with years of being folded and unfolded. My father's name, Russell Reddick, sat on the line for customer. The watch's serial number matched. 16 years back, Miguel said. Took a loan for $3,400. Paid it off in less than a month. Cash. No drama. I remember him. Walked in with his shoulders square, even though life had been trying to fold him. Men like that stick. He let the silence be kind. I stared at my father's blocky handwriting and felt something twist. He hadn't told me because he didn't want me to worry. He hadn't told me because some things you do for your kid quietly. Miguel cleared his throat. There's more, he said. Weirdest damn thing I've seen on a Rolex, and I've seen a lot. He took the watch from my hand, ran a nail along a seam at the clasp, and popped something so small I'd swear it wasn't there 2 seconds ago. A panel slid open, no bigger than a postage stamp. He teased out a folded scrap of yellow paper with tweezers like it might bruise. My father's all caps slanted across the page. Noah, if you're seeing this, check safe deposit box 417 at Commonwealth Trust. Keys in my socket set behind the 13 millimeters. I swallowed hard enough to hurt. Miguel watched my face and nodded like, yeah, there it is. No offense, he said softly, but your old man was the kind of guy who plans for failure because he expects to keep going anyway. Most folks stash something dumb in a compartment like that. Yours stashed a plan. I slid the watch onto my wrist where it had always belonged. The weight settled me. I'm good, I said, though my heart was beating like a rabbit under a porch. Miguel's mouth twitched. Do me a favor, he said. If you talk to the kid who brought it in, educate him. Gently. Or not. He's about to learn, I said. I didn't go back to the warehouse. I didn't call anyone. I pointed the truck west and drove to my mother's house in Sun Mesa, a stucco box inside a maze of identical stucco boxes, the kind of gated community that believes the world stops at the guard shack. The garage door was open. Alan's stupid lifted golf cart, the vehicle of men who want to pretend they work without ever breaking a sweat, sat parked diagonally across the walkway like a throne. I didn't knock. My mother and Alan sat at the kitchen table, morning light cutting through the blinds in stripes, coffee cups sweating rings. Paper lay everywhere, bank statements, envelopes, a legal pad with Jace scrawled across the top in red ink. I set the watch box in the gap between them, not gentle. Lose something? I asked. My mother went pale in one breath, eyes locking on the watch like it had fangs. Alan leaned back in his chair like I'd lobbed in a live grenade. Where'd you get that? He demanded too quickly. It was reported stolen at 10 this morning, I said. Funny thing, pawn shop owner called me, said a kid named Jace tried to sell it yesterday. Alan's mouth did a fish impression. My mother opened her lips, closed them, tried again. Noah, she said, soft, wheedling, the voice she uses when she wants to cover a mess with a napkin. It isn't what you think. You pawned it for him, I said. For the app. For his next big pitch. My voice came out flat. Facts don't need volume. He needed help, she said, snapping back. Just a little seed money. He has vision. He's not going to spend his life hauling shingles and fixing leaky toilets. I install solar and roofs and build decks that don't collapse under a load, Mom. That's not a punchline. That's a living. Alan snorted. You've always been small-time, kid. Good with your hands, no ambition. Jace is different. He's got a shot. Different. I lifted the watch. He stole from me. You helped him. My mother stood so fast her chair squeaked. You have no idea what it's like to watch one son stagnate while the other reaches for more. I wanted to laugh. I did, a little, but there was nothing funny in it. What I know is what it's like to watch one son work until his hands bleed while the other son lives off whoever's dumb enough to believe him this week. You took $9,000 that didn't belong to you and put it on Black because he asked nice. Alan folded his arms and tried to look taller. Prove it. I slid a folded report across the table. Already did. The Las Cruces Police Department header looked official and sanitary against their chaos piles. Security footage. Sales slip. Jace's grainy smile and your wife's just helping expression. The serial number on the watch. The engraving. It's tidy. My mother's eyes filled, but not with the right thing. Noah, please. Don't ruin this. He's so close. He launched right into felony theft, I said. And you fueled it. Call the cops, Alan said, attempting bravado. See how far you get with family dispute over a used watch. I filed before I drove here, I said. I turned. The words I wanted stabbed the air. I'll make you a deal, I added softer. Wire me the 9 with interest by Friday. I'll consider it closed. No charges. You get a breath. Jace gets a wake-up. We all go on. My mother stared at the watch like it might absolve or devour her. Alan stared at me like he could handle me, and the tragic thing was he believed it. You'd throw away your family over this, my mother said as I reached the door. How many times did you throw me away for him? I asked without heat, and left. I didn't go home. I drove to the house my father used to rent, the bungalow with the slanted porch and the chain-link fence still patched with the same scrap I'd zip-tied there the summer I was 19. The new tenants kept the grass brown and honest. Behind the house stood the shed with the door that never closed right unless you lifted while you turned the key. I lifted and turned and stepped into the smell of him. Oil, sawdust, the metallic shadow of an old mower, sweat woven into wood. Under a blue tarp, right where memory said it would be, sat my father's rolling toolbox. Red Husky, 3 drawers. Scarred by life, still solid. I flipped the lid. Tools slept inside in neat rows like soldiers. He'd always liked order. Sockets lined up in ascending size. My fingers slid along muscle memory, counting 10, 11, 12, until I reached the 13 millimeters. I lifted it. Behind it, taped to the back panel with yellowing electrical tape, waited a small brass key wrapped in wax paper. For years he'd kept a key clipped to his belt loop like a charm. I'd fiddled with it when I was 6, when I was 12, when I was 22 changing out alternators in the driveway. I never knew what it opened until he told me, and he told me inside a watch. Commonwealth Trust lives downtown in an old bank building that pretends change is a rumor. The lobby has wood paneling you could skate on, fake ferns that grew dusty in 1993 and never recovered, and a pile of dog-eared magazines no one reads. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and a bun looked up from her computer when I walked in holding the key like it might evaporate. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I hope so," I said. "Box 417. It was my father's. Russell Reddick." Her face softened. "He wore work boots like church shoes," she said, surprising me. "Always thanked me twice. I remember him." 10 minutes later, she was unlocking a narrow metal drawer in a little private room with a table that had seen a lot of quiet. When she left me alone, I slid the key in, turned, and pulled the box toward me. Inside sat a worn manila envelope, a black ledger, and a smaller sealed envelope with Noah written across it in sharp bold enough to feel like a voice. I opened the letter first, breath held because some instincts never die. His handwriting ran across the page in stern capitals. "Noah, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Means you found the watch compartment. Good. You always paid attention when it mattered. There's a set of bearer bonds in the big envelope. No names, no banks, no taxes. They'll cash. Don't be stupid with them. The ledger is my list. Work I finished and work I never got paid for. Some folks ran while I was getting sick. I didn't have the fight for collections. This is not about money. It's about time. Time to leave if you want. Time to build what's yours. Time to breathe without someone taking a piece. You don't owe anybody your future. Not me, not your mother, not whatever family looks like by the time you read this. Do one thing, make it yours. Dad." I sat there with my father's voice under my hands and let my eyes burn until they cleared. Then I opened the big envelope. The bonds were there, crisp, anonymous paper dated from years that felt like a different country. I counted. $112,000 in clean, untraceable history. The ledger smelled like pencil and glue. Every page was my father. Dates, addresses, materials, labor hours in neat, unforgiving columns. Some rows had a rectangle around paid. Some had nothing. Some had angry marks he'd probably apologized to the paper for making. Near the front, Garrison and Pike Builders. Commercial flooring. Mesa West. $21,750. 2 angry underlines and a note. No check. No call back. I knew the logo. I'd bid against those guys. I'd lost 2 jobs to them and hated myself for caring. At my kitchen table that night, I spread the book open and took photos of every page like a man mapping a minefield he intended to cross. The 13mm socket lay next to the ledger like a small reliquary. I scrolled my phone and found a number for a lawyer a friend in framing wouldn't shut up about. Said she was mean in all the ways you want the law to be mean. Her office was upstairs from a car insurance storefront and down the hall from a dentist whose window poster promised painless root canals. Dana Ortiz wore jeans and a navy blazer and a look that said she had already solved 2 of my problems between breakfast and my arrival. "You're the guy with the book," she said, and motioned me into a small conference space that felt like it had held more truth than comfort. I slid the ledger over. She flipped through it the way a mechanic listens to an engine, eyebrows lifting at details civilians miss. "You scan this." "Photos." "Scan it," she said. "Keep the original safe. This is a spine. You don't wave a spine around unless you want something to move. She tapped the Garrison and Pike pages. Still in business? Bigger than ever. Good, she said. People who brag on their website about new clients hate liens. So what's next? We cash the bonds, she said, as if she were saying we grab milk on the way home. Quietly. I know a guy who will make it polite. She turned another page. Then we send demand letters with teeth. Some of these will fold. Some will bark. We lien the loud ones. We copy their clients where necessary. We make it cheaper to pay than to posture. How long? 60 days for the first wave, she said, and smiled the way I do when a cut miter fits perfectly. I'm good at what I do. I signed retainer paperwork that looked boring on purpose. When I reached the door, she said, Mr. Reddick? Your father did you a favor people like you rarely get. He documented. He respected his own work enough to write it down. Let's respect that. I drove straight to my mother's the next morning because I had a bed to move and a box of old shirts to decide about and a decision to finalize. I wasn't planning to say a word. I was planning to load and go. She stood in the doorway when I pulled up, arms folded in a way meant to look composed and landing somewhere around brittle. You're really doing this? She asked, like I'd said I was switching religions to spite her. I didn't answer. The guest room where I'd been renting oxygen for 6 months was almost empty. I filled the last tote with tools and memories and resentment I didn't want anymore. Alan sat at the table pretending to read the paper without turning a page. His silence wasn't dignified. It was strategic. When I slammed the tailgate, Jace came loping around the side of the house. All surfer smile and no ocean. He propped an arm on my truck like it was his idea to brace it. Hey man, he said. Mom said you were moving. That's wild. I looked at him. I want my 9 back, I said. With interest. He laughed because that's his first reflex. For sure. As soon as we launch, I'll Venmo you from the penthouse. I filed a report, I said. Your name is on it. The shop turned over footage, slip, copy of your ID. This isn't a vibe. It's a record. His grin fell off like it had never fit. Behind me, my mother hurried down the steps, voice already cracking into that ugly place where pleading turns into scolding. Noah, don't do this. Don't ruin his life over a mistake. He had no problem messing with mine, I said without turning. You both watched him do it. You co-signed. Alan finally stood like he was about to deliver a line that would sting. Your father would be ashamed, he said, walking away from family over a hunk of steel. No, I said, looking him in the face so he could hear it without misunderstanding. He'd be proud I stopped letting you set the terms of love. I got in my truck, closed the door with care, and left. No slam. No swearing. You don't fight the ocean. You step out of it. Dana moved the bonds like she'd been born at a bank. 2 signatures. A meeting with a man in a tucked-in golf shirt who smelled like cologne and rules, and a receipt with more zeros than I'd ever seen next to my name. A clean $112,000. I sat in the cab with the door open and the sun on my arm and read the number 5 times, like it might subtract itself if I blinked wrong. My father had trusted me with a parachute and a map. The letters went out that afternoon. Most companies ignored the first wave, because that's what men do when they think a problem will die if they look past it. Garrison and Pike didn't ignore the second wave. Dana's lien threat hit their inbox and CC'd their flashiest commercial client, and included scans of invoices with signatures their lawyer couldn't pretend were forged. They wired $21,750 4 days later with a subject line that said settlement in a tone that sounded like an apology they refused to write. Another 19 grand landed across 2 weeks from smaller jobs. Checks with memo lines like balance due, closed, and final, like they were closing a file on stubbornness instead of theft. 5 more cases were pending. Dana sent me updates that read like weather reports. Gusting toward payment, expect showers of excuses. News travels through the bones of a town. I heard Jace's startup died before anyone could ask which problem it was meant to solve. He rented a glass-walled office for vibes and paid a design shop $6 grand to invent a logo that looked like a teardrop pretending to be a rocket, filmed a promo spot with stock footage of hands holding tablets, and built nothing. The site went dark. The Instagram dried up. Either he learned or the world taught him. Either way, not my class. 2 months after I moved, Alan called while I was standing in the paint aisle at Lowe's, trying to decide between two whites that looked identical to my eyes and apparently wildly different to people with opinions. "Noah," he said, like we'd just hung out for lunch. "We were wondering if you could float us a short-term bridge loan, just until." I hung up. I didn't say it with words because the click said it better. My mother emailed a week later. Subject line, "We need to talk." It was a single paragraph that treated my boundaries like a protest she was sure she could outlast. She said I'd divided the family, that Jace had been under pressure, that I'd escalated. She ended with, "You could have handled this quietly, like family." I forwarded the police report and highlighted Jace's name and the timestamp. I didn't add a sentence. There wasn't one that would help. She didn't reply. Silence for once did the right work. I didn't buy a boat or a ridiculous truck with shocks that announced themselves from a mile away. I bought a single-story ranch with a cracked driveway and a garage so deep it felt like a promise. 2 bedrooms. A yard that wanted someone to talk to it. The real estate agent said, "It needs vision," and I said, "It needs a level and a weekend." I moved Dad's Husky into the garage and left the 13mm socket right where he'd taped the key. Sometimes I run my thumb along the old adhesive and feel the past unsticking itself gently. The watch sat on my nightstand most nights. I don't wear it to crawl under sinks or to hang drywall, because that's not what it's for. But in the evenings, when the house goes quiet and I'm the only heartbeat inside it, I open the hidden lid and unfold the note again, just to remember that a man who couldn't stay gave me one last hand on my shoulder when I needed it. I put money back into the little trade school that taught me how to run wire and install toilets and not electrocute myself doing either. I told the director the donation came from a man who believes people like us deserve 2 chances, the one we take and the one we get back. He cried. I pretended not to see, because dignity is a kind of scaffolding you don't kick out from under good men. Work found me the way water finds a path. I printed 3x5 flyers and hung them on cork boards at the grocery store and the rec center, Reddick Repairs. Honest rates. Honest work. A burner phone chirped itself into a business, and then into a rhythm. I replaced ceiling fans, patched holes bored by doorknobs, fixed porches that had given up on themselves, reset wobbly toilets, coaxed dead outlets back to life. I charged enough to pay rent and sleep. I did favors for old ladies who handed me pound cake instead of cash. Word spread. The days filled without the part where someone else's urgency painted over my plans. Every so often at the end of a job, some guy would spot the sub peeking from under my cuff as I reached up to tighten a bracket and whistle low. "Nice watch. Old family thing," I'd say, and leave it there, because the story belonged to me and to the dead and not to the curious. Some mornings I swear I hear my father's boots scuff the concrete behind me in the garage. I don't turn around. I just say, "I know," to the empty air and keep sanding. Dana closed the last of the ledger months later with a text that said simply, "Done." We'd pulled $41,000 out of people who once assumed the dead took their invoices to the grave. The bonds had given me air. The ledger gave me the right to inhale it without guilt. Jace's name came up once more in a cashier's line when I overheard 2 women murmuring about a visionary whose GoFundMe for a second chance had raised less than a car payment. I didn't comment. Mercy is cheaper when you keep it in your pocket and don't spend it on men who think sorrow is a coupon. Alan never called again. My mother sent a Christmas card that arrived in March. I left it unopened on the mantel for a week, then put it in a drawer. I will open it someday when the curiosity stops tasting like a trap. Spring slid into the kind of heat that makes siding curl like a language. I replaced my roof because I could. I rewired the sketchy outlets some genius had pigtailed wrong in 1998. I rebuilt the kitchen myself. White shaker doors, maple tops, a backsplash my old boss would have teased me about for being nice enough to eat off. I hung a pegboard in the garage and laid my wrenches on it in size order, because order calms me. The Husky sits against the wall like a red anchor. Sometimes I lay my hand on it before I lock up, a habit that feels like checking a pulse. One night, I stood by the workbench, the watch on my wrist catching the last light, and it hit me that he hadn't just left me steel and paper. He left me time I didn't owe to anyone who hadn't earned it. Time to start over. Time to tell people no without a paragraph of apology. Time to say yes to work that fit my hands and my spine and my sleep. They tried to label me the way they labeled that place card at Ava's wedding in a different life, father by obligation, but labels only stick if you leave the backing on. I peeled mine off. I wrote new ones the way my dad wrote his invoices. Clear lines, no excuses, dates and signatures. I still keep the bank key wrapped in wax paper in the husky, behind the 13 millimeters. I don't need it. But sometimes I lift the socket and check, and when my thumb finds the old tape scar, I smile at the ridiculous tenderness of it. A man hid a map in a watch and a key behind a socket because he trusted the boy he raised to find a way. People ask for morals like stories owe them receipts. I don't have one that fits on a t-shirt. I have this, which is better. Don't hand your future to anyone who didn't sweat for it, and don't apologize when you take it back. If you want the cinematic ending, sorry. No courthouse scene with Jason handcuffs. No public screaming match in a grocery aisle. My revenge looks like a quiet house with a paid-off roof and a workbench that makes sense. It looks like a ledger with most of the pages stamped paid, because we decided not to let theft pretend to be fate. It looks like a watch that ticks when I sleep and keeps letting me wake up to a life no one else is borrowing. Sometimes, very early, before the city remembers what noise is for, I take that watch off and set it on the workbench and listen to it by itself. There's a specific sound a mechanical movement makes. Patient, stubborn, forgiving. I listen until my breathing matches. Then I pick it up, slide it back where it belongs, and go to work.